The day we're recording this marks the day that I've been without my father longer than I have had him in my life. And losing a parent at a fairly young age is a traumatic experience for a child or an adolescent. I had always been a creative, whether it's drawing, making music, and later it became writing novels. Now, I want to believe that suffering creates better art, but is that the case? And that's the discussion for today. What do you think?
I think that there is definitely a part where if you have suffering in your childhood, it kind of sets a vector for who you're about to become throughout the continuation of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that if you're bullied and you're an outlier, that you start wondering why. Thus, like, some people become very introspective of it, but I do also think that it has to do with your capacity to gain insight and to see who you really are, to reflect on yourself. That's a skill that not everyone has. So it's not like, hey, you're being bullied and then boom, here's a psychologist experiencing storms.
Well, let's say when your life is all sunshine and rainbows, you don't have the necessity to think things through. It's just why would you bother with thinking how the world works when everything is just okay for you? Are people who are bullied more prone to think deeper?
I think you're born with a certain capacity for intelligence. You have a certain IQ, and I think that can be steered by education and training. But intelligence is the capacity to learn new knowledge. Wisdom is the way that you can understand life and the insightfulness. And smart is just like how well are you to adapt to things, I guess. There's a lot of pretty intelligent people. There's a lot of people that have never been bullied that are intelligent. But insight comes from experience. The more you go through hard things, the more experience you get, because it's rarely ever the great things that offer you great insight or experience. So yes, I do think that there's great writers that have been known to had a pretty rough childhood. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking about, for instance, Kafka or Orwell, we know them to be monumental writers that have defined the way that we look at life. You have Kafkaesque, Orwellian. They've become so larger than life that there's words in the dictionary. These people wrote works that transcended life and were about life at the same time. But to kind of answer your question straight away, I think that the people that touch our lives in the most meaningful ways have gone through some anguish and some suffering. Does then suffering make for better art?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, well, I've long believed that suffering creates better art, and being bullied and seeing a lot of death in your life. I've kept myself hostage for a very long time in that sort of victim role. Like, I don't want to meet new people because by default I know they suck. I really was a misanthrope for a large part of my life, because I believed that if I didn't have that anymore, then why should I write?
But you have to overcome it. I don't think that the tortured artist syndrome is the way to go to keep yourself, because anguish and suffering is stressful. And writing under great stress is not always great for creativity. It can be very inhibiting. I think that regardless, creativity is a escape. And for me, the writer that best can kind of like show me like whether that's right or not is I think someone like an Orwell. I think when you look at like his youth, he wrote about this in Such Were the Joys, which is an essay he wrote, and he recounts his abusive childhood, but that was at a boarding school, and when he wetted the bed, he was basically beaten up by other students, but that was basically the headmaster saying they should beat him up if he does that. And that then kind of translates into 1984, where someone feels this horrible grudge against authoritarian leaders. That is the lens through which he saw life, and that is the things that he started focusing on. I mean, you probably have some great insights about Kafka as well.
Yeah, when I read Trial or The Hunger Artists, and that's what the Kafkaesque is, when you read his short works or his works in general, it's this oppressive feeling like the walls are closing in on you, and it's so bleak, I guess. And him working just some clerk jobs at an office, I feel really related to that, because my biggest dream is to become a writer, and I don't hate my job. but it's not my dream job.
Like nobody wakes up one day out of the mother's womb and thinks, I'm gonna be a marketing expert. That's what I wanted to be when I was a kid.
You're living someone else's dream.
Yes.
Like we said in the other episode.
Yes, that feels like, first world problems, like what is suffering? But look, if you're very comfortable, then, suffering is something that plays on the level of comfort that you have.
And what do you think is the worst suffering? Because I have my opinion.
I think we agree on the fact that people have a sense of belonging which comes out of an evolutionary state. This is an insight that you came with, and I completely wholeheartedly agree with it, but loneliness is perhaps the worst suffering one can go through.
Exactly. When you look at Kafka, or just imagine Orwell being this maybe 8-year-old kid who wetted his bed and being beat up for it, how lonely did he have to be? And there are so many writers. We recently went to Denmark and we went to the Hans Christian Andersen museum, and he, as a hopeless romantic and maybe suppressing, I don't know if that's true, but suppressing his homosexuality.
There were relationships in his life that felt like he might at least like men as well, and that he had to suppress that, also always having been doubted by everyone around him.
Yeah, and being doubted is also a very lonely feeling when no one believes in you, in what you do.
And it comes to the fact that if someone doubts you, they won't rely on you. And if they won't rely on you, that means that you're useless. And if you're useless, you don't fit into the tribal part. So if you ever get sick or it doesn't go well, you're useless. So why would we help you? Why would we be useful for you? It all stems from evolutionary standpoint that we need to fit in a tribe. We need to find our people. And as a writer, that is still the case, even if we're more secluded people, that writing is a way to feel closer to people, because we write these personalities to better understand people. And that's why suffering, yes, leads to better art, in a sense of like being able to write three-dimensional people.
Yeah, and when you embrace your own deepest, darkest thoughts, then I think you can understand other people's as well. Because most characters writers develop are based on real life people. And when you suffer and you have to think about life, then you can analyze other people as well in that perspective.
To kind of conclude there, I think suffering throughout life and in your past can help you to gain better insight about life, or at least push you to think about life more. Orwell has definitely had his tuberculosis while writing 1984, but I think it goes deeper than that. I don't think that, he had tuberculosis and all of a sudden he became this insightful person. Some sort of childhood trauma and going through that and then becoming a full-fledged person who thinks about things, yes, that creates art. The suffering itself doesn't, but what happens from that suffering, what blooms from the concrete, that is definitely what brings art to the people.
Yeah, so should you suffer if you want to become a writer?
You should definitely not look it up.
No, but I think you should embrace your deepest, darkest thoughts, because the darkness will never lie.
Yes, true. It will always be sincere.
Yes.
Okay, good discussion. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, and thank the listeners for listening.
Yeah, and I hope there's some writers out there that better understand their own relationship with pain or anguish. And yeah, see you in the next one.